In 1857, Indians from all over the country rose up in rebellion against their British colonial overlords to valiantly fight for independence. We Indians generally refer to this event as the First War of Indian Independence, while the British, looking at it from their point of view obviously, refer to it as the quote-unquote Sepoy Mutiny or Sepoy Rebellion. As Indians, were always given this narrative that this was a battle between Indians and the British, and whenever this topic comes up in conversation, this is how it's talked about. If you've watched the Amir Khan movie Mangal Pandey The Rising from 2005, this is also how you're made to feel. At least this is how I felt the 2 or 3 times I've watched this movie, but it's been a really long time since I've watched it. But anyway, I was reading more about this event and recently, and what I found was that it wasn't at all about Indians fighting against the British. It was actually about nationalistic Indians fighting 3 different groups of people who were all against them. One was obviously the British. 2 were sepoys who were remained loyal to the British instead of joining the rebellion. And 3 were Indian soldiers who were loyal neither to the nationalist cause nor to the British. They were loyal to their local Raja, and that Raja decided to ally with the British in this fight instead of with the Indians against the British. And the reason that I feel like it's important to highlight this is that it was not actually just a struggle between Indians and foreign aggressors. It was a struggle between people who believed in Indian self-rule and people who did not believe in Indian self-rule, which was again a diverse group of people, the vast majority of whom were also Indian. I've seen estimates that say about maybe 20% of the forces, the British forces that fought against them were actually white British people, with the other 80% or so being Indian. And then, of course, the entirety of the armies of these different Rajas that allied with them were totally Indian as well. So the question that we should be asking here is that if Indians are trying to fight against foreign rule and achieve self-rule, why is it that some Indians also opposed this and fought against these kinds of people that we now regard as nationalistic heroes that we admire? Now, the reason that I got to start to think about this whole topic is, of course, this new movie that came out a couple months ago, Sardar Udham Singh. Right? It's about Udham Singh, who took some justice against the British by assassinating Michael O'Dwyer, who was in a sense responsible for the Jallianwallah Bagh massacre. He also did a lot of other terrible things to the Indians before that. But anyway, he was assassinated by him. So Udham Singh assassinates him, and it's a great thing that we all celebrate, and we consider him a great patriotic hero, and of course then a martyr because he got executed for it. But the actual shot, if you think about the Jallianwallah Bagh massacre, the actual shots that killed all of those Indians at that place were all fired by Indian people. The order was given by General Dyer, who was of course a white British man, but the actual shots were fired by his men, all of whom were Indian. None of the people of that force that he took in there were white at all. All of them were Indian. Now, side note here, the person that Sardar Udham Singh assassinated was Michael O'Dwyer, who was the lieutenant governor of Punjab at the time that this thing happened. The person who gave the order to shoot was General Dyer, who was the brigadier general at that time. So you have O'Dwyer, who gets assassinated, and Dyer, who issues this command. So both of these people were very, anti-Indian and behind this heinous thing that happened. But these are 2 different people. I know a lot of people, because they're kind of exposed to all these things at the same time, they get confused because these people have 2 very similar last names, right? O'Dwyer and Dyer, but they're different. Anyway, off of that tangent, back to the point, the big issue that I wanted to tackle is this, that our own biggest enemy is always our own people that purposely work against our interests. Whether it was in the case of the 1857 rebellion or Indian soldiers obeying British orders to murder Indian people at Jallianwallah Bagh, this is decades and decades later anyway. This is important to think about for a couple different reasons. One, Indians have these two conflicting impulses that they're, one, extremely proud of being Indian and who they are, and simultaneously they have an extreme inferiority complex and are very ashamed of who they are as well. And the reason that this is important is that we have to really address this pride aspect with respect to the events of 1857, because proud patriotic Indians really don't want to deal with the tough questions. And this is what I've found. This is basically what I found, that patriotic Indians really just want to watch these kinds of movies, feel a deep sense of hatred against the British, and then live under this fantasy that all of the Indians, also had these patriotic feelings at that time, as if the fact that Indians in post-independence India have patriotic feelings towards what happened here, that the people who were actually there at that time had these kinds of feelings, because that's obviously not the case. The reality was that a large portion of the Indian society did not believe in supporting this cause and did not want it to be strong. I mean, when I was reading about what happened in 1857, it was really troubling to me, to be quite honest with you, because as the information about the fact that this quote-unquote rebellion was going to happen, it was being planned, information is spreading all throughout, I guess mostly like what is now UP and MP and stuff, but anyway, it's spreading all over the place. There were many, many, many instances of these loyal, obedient dogs who were, Indian people who were loyal to the British, actually informing their British superior officers of this and doing as much as they could to try to stop it. Fortunately for the Indians, these claims basically went unheeded. I guess the British just didn't trust or believe what they were saying. But you have many, many instances of this. Even more troubling, or maybe equally as troubling, you also have many instances of Indian officers shielding their British superiors and their families from being attacked when they knew that this kind of that the 1857 events were going to happen. So I feel like it's basically the height of treachery and betrayal to, you basically are saying that you want to continue to be an obedient servant, under the feet of your superior white colonial overlords, instead of joining this nationalistic cause for self-rule. And again, the reason that I bring this up is that we need to tackle tough questions. We get too wrapped up in that first of those two opposing impulses that I talked about, pride. We get too wrapped up in this sense of pride, and we just want to say everything's perfect, nothing bad ever happened. All the Indian society was all just totally united against the British, which was nowhere close to being the case. You look at the history and people were very interested in serving under the British. And the British themselves also understood how to kind of learn what they needed to learn about Indian society to kind of not offend people's sensibilities and things like that. And also what's interesting to learn about, if you're thinking about the, understanding the psychology of the enemy, we all know that 1857 happened because of what? Hindus have to put their mouth on cow fat, which is defiling. Muslims have to put their mouth on pig fat, which is defiling for both of their religions, right? This was the reason that people got so up in arms about this. They had been serving under British officers for a century before that. It was this kind of an information that actually propelled these events, right? We all know about this story. What we don't know, because it's not really talked about and you have to actually do research to find, is after 1857 happens, the British powers that be tried to take more precautions to not offend the sensibilities of the Indian people, whether it was with regard to religion or whether it was regard to castes, right? Not forcing people who are from upper caste to serve alongside people from lower caste. not forcing Muslims and Hindus to eat food together, things of this nature. I mean, you even have stories of white British officers getting their weapons and things like that blessed by Brahmin priests. These guys were learning the languages. They were taking on Indian mistresses. I mean, they had an understanding of, if we just kind of learn their what they would consider to be eccentricities about Indian culture from their point of view, we can basically kind of keep all of these separate groups of people who have some conflicts with one another. We can kind of keep them separate, keep them working for us. Right? I mean, we always say that the British came and did divide and rule tactics, and that's how they were able to rule for so long. I think in my personal reading of these events, not just this, but the British colonial rule in general, I think what the British did, the only time they really did divide and rule was the Aryan-Dravidian divide, pushing this Aryan invasion theory, claiming that people came from the outside, gave us our culture and stuff like that. I think outside of that one thing, what they actually did was just understand and exploit already existing divisions within society, whether it was based on religion or caste or the basic lack of national consciousness, where people in one region of the country didn't really see their compatriots as people from a different part of the country that had different customs, different language, different cuisine, etc. And, this is again important to keep in mind because now the British are gone. The British are not the problem in India. They have not been an issue in India since they left in 1947. But the mindset that they kind of gave to the Indian people through the whole slaves of Macaulay and Aryan invasion and all of these kinds of things, and also caste-based reservations, religion-based reservations and stuff like that, that is now the enemy that we have to tackle. And all of the people who are pushing those things now or since independence are all Indian. They have adopted either a Western or heavily Western influenced kind of a worldview, but they themselves are Indian. And my basic kind of a theme that is going to be overarching over this whole video that I want to end on is that we need to understand our internal enemies, which, again, when we gloss over the fact that large numbers of Indians betrayed the nationalistic cause in 1857, the people who killed the people at Jallianwallah Bagh were also Indian, we're really missing that entire point. We're trying to portray all of our problems as coming from the outside, where in reality, a tiny problem can come from the outside, influence people within your own society, and then make everything far, far worse and create all these problems, right? So that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Jai Shri Ram.